Welcome to Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed, where conversations are designed for nonprofit leaders by nonprofit leaders to inspire, educate, and motivate. Get ready to dive into the world of nonprofits where the nerdy passion and unstoppable dedication of those making a real impact is celebrated. Together with your host, Jarrett Ransom, the inspiring stories, tactical insights, and game-changing strategies of nonprofit leaders will be explored. Join us for real talk with real people. Jarrett and her guests unravel the mysteries of successful fundraising, uncover the secrets of effective advocacy, and nerd out over innovative approaches to solving social challenges. Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed is your go-to podcast for no-nonsense discussions with real-life superheroes of the nonprofit sector. Get ready to unleash your inner nerdiness and discover or rediscover how to change the world together. Now let's dive in and embrace the power of our nerdy side.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to these critical conversations. I'm happy to have Katie Gaston with Boomerang joining me today. We dove into a topic that's on a lot of nonprofit leaders' minds right now: artificial intelligence, and what it actually looks like to use AI well in the nonprofit sector. Now, I know there's a lot of noise, a lot of curiosity, and even some hesitation around AI, especially in fundraising. And Katie brings a grounded, practical perspective to the conversation. We talk about how Boomerang approaches AI as a partner to fundraisers rather than a replacement for human judgment, and why keeping people at the center of donor relationships matters more than ever. So if AI feels exciting, overwhelming, or somewhere in between for you, this conversation is a great place to start. Katie also shares practical advice on starting small, focusing on real pain points, and using Boomerang's resources, including their prompt library and their content hub, to help guide some thoughtful AI adoption for you and your team. So before we dive in, I want to say thank you to Boomerang and the Fundraising Academy at National University for sponsoring this season and for supporting these critical conversations with nonprofit leaders. I'm thrilled to have Katie with me today, so let's jump into conversation.
Well, hey there and welcome. I'm really excited because today's guest joins us from Boomerang, and we have Katie Gaston here. Katie, welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. This is a conversation that I know many of us are having, some of us more than often. But before we dive into the meat and potatoes, if you will, of this juicy conversation, I'd love it if you would share with me and all of our listeners a little bit about yourself, Katie, and the role or the roles, yes, that's plural, that you play in the nonprofit sector.
Oh, I love that. Well, if you don't know about Boomerang, Boomerang is a nonprofit giving platform. So we have CRM, volunteer, and fundraising all in one. Start with that context to know that Boomerang's in the software space. My role at Boomerang is I'm the director of product marketing, which means that I'm a storyteller. I help think about the stories that we need to tell. So what matters to all of you as nonprofits, and how do we help translate kind of the technical jargon that you might see in a software company in a way that really not just is understandable, but also helps achieve the goals that you're trying to achieve in the nonprofit sector. So yeah, TLDR is I'm a storyteller.
I love that. Too
Yeah.
long didn't read. Yeah, I absolutely love that. Thank you, Katie. And I think storytelling is really important. And that brings us to our conversation and the topic, if you will, of today, which is AI, artificial intelligence. And I am hearing, and I'm also seeing so many leaders, hearing a lot of noise right now around AI, and not just right now. Let's be honest. It's been percolating, if you will, for quite some time. But also feeling the pressure to do something, right? So how should we, as leaders in this space, how should we think about AI in the midst of all the hype? What distinguishes, this meaningful AI from distracting, maybe even in this fundraising process? That in and of itself is a question full of so many different paths. But let's just get started in this AI space. I'm really curious, what you're hearing and what you're seeing, and then the pressures that we're feeling about this do something.
Totally. I think that's such a good question, because I think anytime a new technology comes on the market, as individuals, we may feel pressured either as individuals or from our team to say, you have to use this, you have to use this. And then you go to these conferences or you talk with your colleagues and everyone's saying, how are you using AI? How are you using AI? So it can feel really overwhelming, especially if you're not in a place where maybe you know where to even get started. I think the key thing with any new technology, there's a concept in product development and engineering called jobs to be done. And I really like it because the goal of jobs to be done, like as a framework, when you think of building new technology, is let's not think about the tool. Let's think about what job are we solving. The example I use that I always love to tell people with the jobs to be done framework is like mowing a lawn. You could use a lawnmower to mow the lawn, right? You could also use a pair of scissors. Now that would be a really inefficient way to mow a lawn, but
Yeah.
the reason I want to bring that up is like the goal that you're trying to achieve is mowing the lawn. So I think when we think of what we're doing in the nonprofit space and with fundraising, I think the thing that I would always encourage everyone to start with is what job is not working for me right now? In every single day, what's giving you the biggest heartburn? Is it maybe inefficient? Is it giving you anxiety that you can't get an answer as quickly as you need to? Um, Whatever that job is, the thing you're trying to solve for, start there. And then you can think about, will AI help me solve this job in a way that I want to? And then experiment. And we'll get into all of the other things. But I think that that's the thing I would say. You can talk about how to use AI, how to use AI, but it always goes back to, well, what are you trying to solve for? And how do I get really clear about what that job that I'm solving for, or that
Yeah.
I'm fixing is before you even begin to consider the tool that you use for it? Yeah.
Right. And I am totally dating myself, but your analogy took me to Edward Scissorhands, and I'm like, can you
Yes,
imagine if we all had the ability to cut
completely.
our grass like that? And so, yes, for those of you listening, they're like, I have never heard this movie. Go back. It's a good one.
I'll jump in and say goats. Goats are also a way to mow a lawn, and there's goat
Yes,
rental services out there. I know in Idaho
that's
we have
true.
them. So there's just don't get so caught up with the tool you're using. Think more about what problem are you solving? Yeah.
Yeah, what problem are you solving? Well, and this leads me to, as fundraisers, and you said this, we're storytellers, and fundraising is deeply relational. And of course, there's concern, understandably, about AI replacing human judgment. So I want to ask you, Katie, and the Bloomerang standpoint, really, like, what does it look like to design AI as a partner rather than a replacement, right? And
Yes.
why does keeping us humans in control, like, why does that matter so much in this fundraising space?
Completely. Well, fundraising, like you said, like you started that question off, is deeply relational. And I think that making sure we always, no matter again, the tool or the technology involved, making sure that we center on that the relationship at the heart of fundraising is the most important thing that we can keep front and center. I firmly believe technology can't replace that. Now, that might look like human judgment of, maybe technology and AI, and I'll explain how we're doing this from a Bloomerang perspective, could help you make decisions on who to speak with first. But the process of interacting with them, the memory you had from the last conversation, again, tools can help supplement that. But the interactivity of that still has to remain, in my opinion, deeply personal and deeply human because even with AI becoming such a big force in technology in our industry today, I think donors can tell. I think that they still want many individuals still want a personal interaction, personal human interaction. So, for what that looks like from an AI perspective, uh, the focus of development for AI and how we're approaching it with Bloomerang is we recently, hot off the press, we're moving into a beta state with our AI called Penny. Now, Penny is an AI that's built directly into the CRM, but she really focuses on not being a replacement to the fundraiser to you as an individual nonprofit professional, but more just giving you the confidence that you already know what you're doing and validating some of the assumptions that you're making, let's say with your donors, or the clarity around. who should I reach out to or what should I do this week? Because there's so much data out there. It's really hard to know where to get started. And like that process of analyzing it can take forever. So while she isn't going to be the one that's reaching out to the fundraisers or the donors or saying what words that you should use, if she can just help you sidestep some of those first parts of the process so you know what conversation could you have that's going to make the biggest impact, that is like a partner with you alongside of you being the one that's driving the conversation at the end of the day. Does that make sense?
It not only makes sense, it excites me because I'm like, if you can just streamline my task
Yeah.
and say, here's the things that you should focus your time on, here's the people, here's the programs that they're interested in, like here's kind of that blueprint, that's exciting. So I can't wait to meet Penny.
She's pretty cool, I'll say. We've heard
Yeah.
feedback from nonprofits that have been using her for so far that it's not just how does she help me prioritize my day, but also, hey, this is what I'm thinking for my strategic fundraising plan this year. Help me pressure
Mhm.
test that. So, there's a lot of, or on the other side of that, fundraisers who are maybe new to the field of fundraising or haven't actually had a mentor to help them think through how do I get better at this? Am I doing this the right way? So it's not just the clarity, but it's also kind of like a sounding board for confidence that we've heard from individuals who have used her to just be confident that you're moving in the right direction. That is priceless, in my opinion.
That is priceless. And
Yeah.
you might have answered the question that I want to ask next, but I'm sure you have another example. But I
Mhm.
want to ask you, like, maybe where does AI make the biggest difference for fundraisers and fundraising
Yeah.
teams right now? And which areas in particular should we remain human led? Any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Completely. Maybe I'll start with the easy, which is human led. In my opinion, it's
Okay.
interactions. Now, with that said, I think AI can help expedite, let's say, the process of writing appeals and doing segmented appeals to different types of donors. But I think the judgment around when to send, if the person that you're sending it to is indeed the right person, making that final call, I still think needs to be human. So
Yeah.
it's almost like the AI can help, let's say, write a few things, recommend maybe, but the final call, the decision, and that ultimate interaction with the donor still needs to remain human. In terms of use cases that AI can solve for, I think this is such an open book because there are so many. The biggest impact, I would say, could be around donor prioritization. That's one that we're seeing a lot. Because if you think of as a fundraiser, you likely have so many systems you're using every single day. I know our research says a lot. Your data is probably very well spread out between those two things. And you're probably just swimming, trying to keep up with all of the things that are on your plate already. So if a system of AI can help you prioritize, hey, who should I speak with this week based on this goal? That'll reduce the analysis you have to do on all of that data and help you go faster. Um, the thing that I'll say about that, though, is donor prioritization, using AI to do that, you have to be a little careful. And we can get into this around what AI vendors you should evaluate, who to use, but ultimately there is some security sensitivity around AI. So if you're using a third-party AI tool and you do want to use, let's say, prioritize a donor list with transactions, there's a lot of things you need to be mindful of how to do that in a safe and secure way to protect your donor privacy. And there is a little bit of a benefit of using a vendor who has AI built in a secure and safe way to not risk some of those things. But thoughts on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that and from that lens, Katie, because as I shared with you offline before we hit the record button and jumped into this conversation, my mom, who's in her late 70s, just asked me, now, how do you get on Chat GPT? And I thought, oh gosh, Pandora's box, right? Like, here we go. So from the fundraising, she's not a fundraiser. She's not in databases, thank goodness. But, also like having that awareness for all of us using any AI, I think is very important, which does, I want to dovetail on what you were starting to speak on. But from my understanding, many of these AI tools, platforms, if you will, weren't built with nonprofit workflows or even fundraising realities in mind. And you shared some examples of donor prioritization, or like, what's kind of this next step in the maybe even moves management, right? To get even nerdier in this conversation and vernacular. But when we are looking and we are evaluating these AI vendors, these tools, kind of, all of the resources that are out there, what should we be looking for to ensure, right, that these tools are truly safe, but also like they understand fundraising? And I imagine, Penny that is inserted in Boomerang is very specific around this versus Chat GPT that is not a fundraising model.
Yeah, yes, 100%. And there's a few things to think about. So depending on
Okay.
where you are with your technology journey, many of you listening may have experimented with, let's say, using ChatGPT and helping to
Okay.
write an email appeal, or let's say even uploading data and trying to see if it'll analyze it. The first thing to be mindful of is making sure that whatever tool you're using does not store that data and share it as part of their model. Now, with ChatGPT, there is a setting with a paid subscription where you can ask it to not store the data. So, depending on, again, the technology maturity you have and things to consider, do your research and make sure whatever AI model you're using is not training their model based on the data that you're sharing with it, because that can lead to a lot of potential risk. Now, when we think about vendors that are building AI in, I think there's a big spectrum of what they're doing. On some vendors, they're overlaying, let's say, a model like ChatGPT just directly in the system and saying, hey, this is accessible for you to use, go ahead and use it. But the challenge with that is that if it's not guided in a way that's really based on nonprofit best practices, it's possible that the answers that you're getting, while maybe more secure because it's in the system, may still be generic and not incredibly helpful. So the approach that we took with Bloomerang with Penny is we've actually been doing a quarterly consulting program for years. And we've taken the playbooks from our quarterly consulting program that we've worked with literally thousands of nonprofit clients on that we know work. We've built those into Penny. So we know that if you're asking for strategic advice, what you're going to get, we have data to prove actually works for nonprofits. And it's really fun too, because we've done tests where you'll ask, let's say, who should I focus on this year? And you ask, ChatGPT that question, and then we go and ask Penny. And the quality of response that we're getting from Penny is massively better because one, it's securely based on the nonprofit's data. So it actually can analyze and understand what's actually happening in the data. And two, it's actually based on the experience that we've had with making sure nonprofits can raise more money through our quarterly consulting engagements. Yeah.
That is, again, I'm so excited for that, and to hear that, and to know that it is so tailored, to the system and the platform and the constituents that are in the system. Because they are more than, we talk about this in fundraising, like they're more than ATM machines, right? Like this is a
Mhm.
relational position. This is very relational. And as donors, investors, become savvy, more and more savvy, it is so important, I think, to, keep all of that in mind. So I'm eager to see and learn more about this. Um, I talked to someone earlier for the podcast, and they are like me, they're a nerd, but they're a numbers nerd when it comes around finances, right? Which makes me think about um, transparency and how that is so
Mhm.
important, and how donor trust is foundational. And I think that transparency with donor trust and the finances and all of this really go hand in hand, Katie. But how should we be thinking about trust and transparency and ethics, right, when it comes to this AI integration? And what builds confidence while we use these AI tools over time with
Yeah,
that donor in mind?
completely. I think that is such a good question. And it's honestly one that I think every month will continue to evolve. as the
Yeah.
technology evolves, because I think the exciting thing about AI is there's so much opportunity. And the challenge is that we don't know all the things that AI can do. And we're continuously discovering all those things that we can do. So it's why I want to start with that is it's hard to predict how to control for trust if you don't know everything that's going to happen, right?
Yes.
I think
I
the
appreciate
first
that answer.
thing, completely, I think the first thing that we can do is continuously test and validate. So that's obviously like with our Bloomerang approach. When we think about rolling out our AI tool, we're taking a very intentional, controlled approach with
Mhm.
lots of testing with clients over the course of the last several months and future months as well to ensure that the output that we're getting is driving results, trustworthy, secure, built in the Bloomerang, built in someone's own data without obviously any sharing externally. So I think there's a few different layers to that answer. I think one, outside of the approach we're taking, is goes back to what I said before, which is do your homework before you use an AI tool and make sure that the data that you're inputting is not training the model. That's the first thing you
Yeah.
can do because donor information leakage, as an example, could be a really big risk if you're not taking that extra step. That's both for you as a fundraiser, as well as I would say, if you, let's say you're an executive director or you're leading a team of fundraisers, you as the leader instilling that as a best practice within the organization as well. Because that can be really hard. It's so easy to go use a free tool online that's AI that it's really important to have some controls around the policies your organization
Yeah.
will adopt for AI usage. I think the second thing I would encourage would be after you've done that first step homework, which is this secure and is it not training the models? The second step I would say of that would be to test it. Do a lot of testing with the model. Try to break it. As in, I want to solve this job. I want to see if it's going to do this and make sure that nothing is weird in the output that you're getting from it before I would say, let's say you send that in a donor conversation that you have or an appeal that you send out. So take a slow and controlled approach. And then I would say the third thing, kind of as an evolution of that to my point earlier, which is AI is consistently changing, is is don't just test it with one job, try to test with a variety of things because the more that you test and experiment, oh, could it work for this? Oh, could it work for this? Obviously, in a safe and secure way. I think the more that we'll uncover around potential areas to control for with trust with donors, as well as opportunities where it can help us do our jobs more efficiently. Yeah.
Trust and validate. And I love that you have integrated that with you and Bloomerang have integrated that into your work. And completely off script, off cuff question, Katie.
Yeah.
For those of us that are trusting and validating, on our own in,
Yeah.
this system, other systems, how many of those examples or scenarios do you recommend that we toss out there, right? If we're like, hey, take us down this donor journey and we test five, or maybe we test 15, like, is there a sweet spot to trust and validate?
Mm. I think that's a really good question. Um, I would say it's hard to answer that in a sense because part of the answer to that would be, well, what capacity and curiosity do you have?
Sure. Sure.
Um, in my own experience, obviously, I personally use AI a lot, and I look at different opportunities I have to see how we can integrate it within our own work, let's say at Bloomerang, and then honestly in my personal life as well. Um, the way that I make that judgment is every week thinking again, going back to jobs to be done is what job is causing me pain and how do I solve that? And before, what I would do is I would say, oh, I have a question. I'm going to go to Google and ask that question. And I would say it's been like every month I change the percentage of times I'm asking Google versus I'm going to my AI tool to ask. And just log that in your own head. What percentage of times when you're dealing with something that's frustrating or that you said, oh, could I do this better? Are you solving this in a different way or saying, could AI help me with that? And I think if you're seeing the percentage of that continue to move more towards AI, It just shows that you're continuously testing it. The other thing that I'll call out is Bloomerang. We really firmly believe in it, seeing if we could help nonprofits do this more effectively. So we actually have a full prompt library we worked with another consultant to develop in order to make it really easy for you, depending on whatever your role is, to look at ways that you could use AI. So check that out. That's a really good resource. If you don't even know where to start, look through it and maybe it'll trigger some inspiration for you.
Katie, thank you. I know that was a curveball question for you, but
Oh,
as
all
we
good.
have this organic conversation, I was like,
Yeah.
I wonder what that is. But great segue, because what you just shared with us, I would love for you to share a little more. How can people learn more about you, Katie? Also, Bloomerang, and I'm going to throw in Penny, right? How can we learn more about
Yeah.
the three of you?
Oh, I love that. Well, you can visit bloomerang.com. No matter where you are, I would say whenever I go to a conference and I speak with nonprofits, Bloomerang has excellent content. So if you're trying to learn how to do something, literally, we have webinars every single week. We have so many things. So no matter what you're looking for, I would just go there and learn some of the content that we've built out literally over the last decade with individuals like yourself, Jared. Um, the other thing in terms of pennies, if you go to bloomerang.com, you can read a little bit more about Penny. If you follow us on our social media, you'll see some videos in the next couple of weeks that we're sharing that gives a little bit of a preview for what Penny actually is. And for myself, I'm on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And I'd love to chat a little bit more about nonprofit fundraising.
Yeah. One final question, and thank you for all of those connection points. So, listeners, take Katie up on it. You are so right. There's so much content. I'm working with a client now that unfortunately and sadly is not using Bloomerang. We're working on our tax receipts for end of year. And I have deferred to Bloomerang to say, okay, what's the best practice to do this? And how might we recreate that in this other system? So, I speak to that as well, Katie. There's so much great content in there, but takes me to my final question as we wrap up today's wonderful conversation. And thank you for all of your insights. I always like to end with this question. And the question is, what final takeaway or piece of advice would you like to leave our listeners listening with today? You've shared so much about AI. You've shared so much about different ways for us to integrate this and test this and really embrace is what what I've heard. So any final, key takeaway that you want to share?
Love that. I would go back to the first thing I mentioned, which was jobs to be done. I think it can be really overwhelming to think about, oh my gosh, I have to try these new things and adopt this technology. And I'm just trying to like get through the day. I'm just trying to get through the week. So just bite size it for yourself. Think of one job, even if it's not even every week, every month, where you say, oh, that's really painful. And then put an hour on your calendar and play and say, or 30 minutes, even if you can't take an hour, play with a tool and say, is there a way that I could make that go faster or better, easier with AI? And if you've done that, then you're starting. And that's the most important thing is just to start somewhere. Yeah.
Thank you. And I love that permission to play. And you also granted us permission to break it. Break it being like, test these systems, see if you can get it to say, what? I'm confused, like really get it to overwork. If you can get steam to come out of the technology's ears, maybe you've hit something that is, we can dig a little deeper. But super insightful, Katie. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And to the entire team at Bloomerang for all of this great work and to take it intentionally with the ethics, the transparency, the donor trust, the relational aspect, all of that in mind. So it's been a pleasure having you. And I just want to say again, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. It was so fun to be here.